this is going to be on CTools Page Manager. I say it's the most misunderstood module in the Drupal ecosystem. So we're just going to kind of dig right in here. How many of you have actually used Page Manager to any extent? You've opened it up, you've used it at some point. Okay, great. How many of you have used panels? Okay, almost the same group. How many of you know that those two things are almost the same thing? Okay. So what is Page Manager? Anybody in here written their own code? Hook menu? Anyone? Anyone? Good. Page Manager is a plugin-driven user interface sitting on top of Hook Menu and Hook Menu Alter. Okay. If you've used it, you know what that means to some extent. This is going to be a bit of an overview of what all those plugins are, why they're there, what they do. So we're just going to kind of start with the context pool and start from there. I call this a context pool because it's a place where we drop in all the various contexts we're interested in for any given page. Yeah, I'm Chris Vanderwater. Also Eclipse GC on Drupal.org. So yeah, no, that's fair information. No, I won't tell you who I am. Yeah, you can blame me. So context is just, it's this idea that we might need users, we might need nodes referenced to other nodes, we might need users who are authors of nodes, we might need all sorts of different types of context. And the context pool is a place where we just drop all that crap in together. It's essentially a keyed array that you can then reference. We have an access control stack. That access control stack consumes the contexts in many cases, and we'll talk about that more later. But what that fundamentally means is that when you use Page Manager to build a page, you're in complete control in almost all instances. If you want users of role X to be able to see this and no one else, you get that. If you want to utilize some sort of node access on it, you can get that. So very powerful, very potentially dangerous as well. So, keep it in mind as we go along here. And then we're going to talk about what I call freedom of content through superior organization. And we'll get there. So, plugin driven. These are the plugins that build up Page Manager. Page Manager is essentially these plugin systems and quite a bit of glue code to put them all together in the way that we want. So we have tasks. Tasks are, wow, I said form alter. That's totally wrong. Tasks are menu alters, okay? Great example. If you want to change the %node page to actually be some different panel than what it is or something like that, then you have to menu alter that in. And so these are the one instances where we don't have complete control over the access. Because we want to continue respecting node access, or we want to continue respecting user access, or whatever may sit on these tasks. So tasks are essentially just an override of the page callback mechanism inside the menu. Task handlers. Task handlers are page callbacks. They're who's going to be in charge of the content that actually gets rendered on this page. The only one most of you have probably ever dealt with is panels. Okay? Anybody in the room ever use context admin? Yeah, I have like 3-4 hands. Okay, context admin is my task handler. It's a module that allows you to take various types of administrative tools, like the ability to create new nodes, or administer groups of nodes, or administer taxonomies, their lists, adds terms, all of that sort of stuff, on a Page Manager page. So if you want to have, say, a news section and be able to create new news from the news page, you could do that. And many, many other things. Context. We talked about context a little bit. We're going to talk about it just a little bit more. There are 3 different types of context. There's context, arguments, and relationships. Now, context themselves, if you want a context, it's just an arbitrary object loader, typically. So you say, I want node 1. I want user 13. I want term 10. Okay? It's arbitrary. You specify the one you want. You get it. Arguments, they come out of the URL. Node %node says load the node that we're currently at as a context in the context pool, right? So that we can reference it later. Relationships. Relationships are load the user who authored the node that we're currently at, right? Load the node that's related through this node reference to the node that we're currently at. So in that case, we would end up having 2 nodes in our context pool. Access. Access is a plugin all on its own. It's pretty much the simplest plugin you could ever learn. If you're interested in the CTools plugin system, and you should be, for lots of reasons, then you should go build an access plugin. All it ever does is return true or false. Not complicated. And so from there, you're just figuring out whether you want to return true or false. Very, very simple system. And then content types. This is probably the most controversial name in the Drupal world. You all think of content types, you think of what we traditionally call node types or node bundles in Drupal 7. Content types are literally just a format for output within Page Manager. Okay, so just don't be confused there. Too late. Sorry. Also, if you all have questions, feel free to interrupt me. I am going to blaze through this because I have a lot of examples and I want to show them. But don't hesitate to ask if you're confused. So this is a typical hook menu call. We have a listing of items, and in that we have paths, we have access callbacks, page callbacks, and then the menu type, those sorts of things. And so Page Manager, like I tried to break this down into a way that you could actually see it to some extent. You'll notice, can everybody see that okay? Is it big enough, hopefully? In the second bullet point, between the square brackets, we have task and argument context. So task is who's actually taking care of the page that we're on. And there's always a task involved. If you're making up your own, then it's the custom task, which allows you to do lots of cool things. If you're using one that's pre-existing, it may be the node view task or the term view task or something like that. Argument context pulls out of there to create contexts and put them into our pool. So the term that we're on, the node that we're on, the user we're on. Access callback is actually, it's just a wrapper function that hands stuff off to the access stack that you build. So you say, these are all the various access components that I have. They all need to return true, or if any one of them returns true, or you can get more complicated than that, then that's going through the access callback. And then the page callback is, again, the exact same way. We essentially just farm this out to a wrapper, which is our task handler, right? And that task handler decides what's going to render there and how, based upon the contexts and anything else that we may have. And then type. I put this up there because Page Manager actually has type controls over what sort of a menu item we're putting out. So if we want a normal menu item, we can have it. If we want a menu task, or what you may think of as a tab, we can have it. If we want a default tab or a local action or any of those things, we can have it. By default, these are all just callbacks, which means they won't show up anywhere, but you can certainly change that. Any questions thus far? No? Okay. So let's talk about the context pool a little bit. I've tried to harp on this one a bit already, but the difficulty with the typical menu system and what we're doing, kind of comparing and contrasting them, is when you say, I want to show something at node % node, the menu system actually consumes it consumes various arguments and ends up producing a fully loaded node object for you that is saved in such a way that you can get to it. But you have to know where it is and how to get there, and it only produces that one thing. And if you need more than that one thing, it becomes very difficult to get multiples of these together. So if you have a situation where I want to actually format the output of the user object that is the author of the node that we're currently looking at, that becomes very difficult with the typical menu system. How do I get that and put it in some place that's generic? Now you have all sorts of hacks that you can put together to actually get that, but there's no generic place to just go and query that information out of Drupal core, really. So what Page Manager does is, Page Manager ends up saying, we have the arguments, we have contexts, we have relationships. All of these things are going to get stored in just this one contexts array, and that array is keyed in such a way that when we start telling it that we want to display output, we pick which one of those items we want to display or consume in order to display output. I'm sure I just confused everybody. Yeah?
So does that mean all the contexts are loaded, or only if they're consumed? And how does that affect performance of the overall context?
Sure, no, that's a great question. So the Page Manager system is actually kind of two-tiered in this regard. You have a single, like the top level is what we refer to as a task. And then various levels underneath are what we refer to as subtasks. And so subtasks can actually, for instance, load their own relationships, load their own arbitrary contexts. But when you're dealing with the task itself, the task can really only load arguments into context and work against those for access, right? So if you wanted to build something at just arbitrarily node %node admin, like we want to put something there that allows the user to admin something about the node, then if you wanted to do something that controlled the access of that by something that's not being passed through an argument, then the only options you have are the current user, which is something that we just assume you may need, so we load it up for you, or user access, right? Which again is essentially consuming that user context. So yeah, you're limited in what you can do at that top level, kind of because A, it's confusing, and B, you could get into some serious performance issues if we didn't do that. I would like to, in the long term, see us actually start allowing arbitrary contexts and relationships up at the task level, but that doesn't exist right now. That only exists at the subtask level. Subtasks, for those of you who have used panels or page manager, is also something that we often call variants. We have multiple names for everything. So, any other questions about this? Great. So, the context pool, I did not rename that screen apparently. As I said, we have 3 different types: arguments, context, relationships. I beat on this dead horse an awful lot because people just don't get this. Arguments are context from the URL. Contexts are arbitrary contexts that you load up manually. And relationships are predefined through the schema. Now, in Drupal 7, and that's mostly what I'm going to talk about today, we have a lot of support for entities built straight in. And we also have a lot of support for the schema in Drupal 7 actually tells us when there's a foreign key present. And so when we relate from one entity to another, we get all that stuff for free. You don't have to build it. So if you end up building, for example, a reference field from one entity type to another, we'll build that stuff for you for free. You don't even have to start trying to integrate into panels. As long as you specify what your foreign keys are, we'll do it. So it's actually pretty cool. Access control. It can consume contextual information. Great example of this could be like, node access. Are we going to consume that node and spit out access control for it? Or, maybe variables. If you build your own access plugin, you could actually check a variable to see whether it's been set to true or false, right? And if that variable has been set in a particular way, then you can return. So that's not contextual information. You're actually querying the database asking, hey, what's going on here? And some access plugins can work that way. Others actually end up consuming the context of the page that you're on. So they aren't limited in that regard. It can really go either way. You can mix and match it. You can do and or. So I want for the user to be able to get to this page if node access says that they can, and if they're a role of X, right? Or if they're a role of X, so node access, or they have this role. We can do a lot of really, really cool things like that. Potentially we can do and or mixes. That requires another CTools module, and I just want to mention that it's out there. So that would definitely confuse things. Freedom of content, before I move on. Any questions on that? Access, yeah.
Not sure if I'm seeing this quite correctly, but let's just say I want to take the CCK field, boolean of some sort, in users, and actually probably multiple, and I want to check those against true, false, situations against something else that's on that page. Check true, false match. Is this equal that?
Sure.
Is that what this would be?
Right, so if you loaded up like the node as a context and you had various fields on it that you wanted to say, like, for example,
let's just say I put a field that says I'm a data miner, and it says this is a data miner page. Therefore, because I'm a data miner, this is a data miner page. Show it to me.
Great. I can run with that.
I'm not a data miner, don't show me chat.
Right. So the question was, well, I'll just kind of give the example and you can figure out the question. Like, only users of a particular type should have access to a particular content type. So this content type is type of X. I am a user of role Y. Only users who have this role can view nodes of this type. That is exactly the sort of use case we would put together for it, yes. Another use case, I have a separate module I mentioned already, context admin. I have about 40 minutes worth of documentation in video format of this stuff on the project page. So you can kind of watch this in a less condensed form, where I really try to go through every step and show what's going on. But it's just context admin. But in that, I have an example where we have news nodes and we have news image nodes, and I have a node reference from one to the other, right? Well, I, just to kind of prove the point, didn't want users to end up going to node percent node in order to view their images. I wanted them to go node, percent node, image, percent image, right? Which gives us a string, something like node 13 image 2 or something crazy like that, right? And so what we ended up doing in that case is we essentially rebuilt organic groups with the Access plugin system right there, right? And so we said, images are only available to be viewed by users who can view the node access controls for news. If they don't have view against this news article, they can't view any of the images related to it. Furthermore, check the node reference to make sure that it is actually referencing that news node. If it's not, also return false. So if both those things don't return true, you don't get to see the image. Does that make sense? Was that clear enough? Awesome. All right, freedom of content. Let's talk a little bit about what Drupal actually does. Drupal loads up, say, a node object, a user object, whatever, and then through various rendering capabilities, renders the whole thing at once and spits it out on the page, right? That's fundamentally what it does. We have what we call a content type plugin. Content type plugins consume contexts, generally speaking. They're limited availability by context. So for example, I certainly don't want to offer you the ability to display a node title if you don't have a node context from which I can pull that title, right? So we're limiting the availability of actually displaying that stuff by the contexts that you have available. It's relatively easy to create these because you create output all the time. These are really simple plugins. And this kind of builds up a reusable toolkit for you that you can take from one project to the next. So if you have a particular way that you like to theme, say, your blog, well, you could build a plugin that not only is only available to node contexts, but only node contexts that are a type of blog, right? If they aren't within that bundle group, they aren't available. And so all of a sudden you get like a library of custom formatters for all these different use cases that you're willing to flesh out. And you can take that stuff with you and just have like a module where you put all of that stuff. Layouts, the same way in panels. If anybody has ever done a custom layout in panels, those are done as plugins. So you can just drop it into a module that your company keeps for all the custom layouts they want. Right? Same sort of thing works here. But through content types, we're able to take individual components of a given context, or we're able to take groupings of components that we want formatted in a particular way and place them anywhere on the page that we want. So this is a really, really powerful idea. Also, I'll tell you that anything that consumes one context can be forced to consume more than one context, or can request that it doesn't work unless it consumes both contexts. So if you had a situation where you wanted to format a blog and the user who had created it together in a particular output component, you could totally do that and say, this content type requires a user and a node. Okay, just keep that in mind. It's totally doable. Any questions? Yeah?
Is most of the stuff that you had to do by writing a module that plugs in, or can you do all this again?
Everything I'm going to do today is going to be interface driven. I won't show everything that I've talked about today. Mostly I'm trying to make you aware of what's there, but I will definitely do some kind of crazy things with Page Manager. So hopefully I'll give you an idea of just how deep the rabbit hole might go. So kind of as our last slide here, we'll talk about workflow. And this is the fundamental workflow that Page Manager goes through. So you end up defining a path. Typically, you define a path. You end up defining a machine name for something. What are we going to export this as if we want to export it? We have a unique name. And we end up picking a task handler. Is this a panel? Is this context admin? Is this a redirect tool? We have a redirect tool built straight in where you can do like 404s or 403s or I don't remember what the other one is that we have. What? I don't think that's the one that's available now.
902.
Yeah, I don't think that's the one that we have. No. Pretty sure.
Can you return INC?
No. But I bet I could build a task handler that would. So from there, we end up defining the page's context, which are done largely through the path because we're only pulling in arguments, right? And it is fundamentally possible to inject other ones here. I've never done it, so I'm not going to talk about it, but we do it with current user, right? And we end up defining the access stack. Now, this is very important, okay? Access defines who can see the menu item. Selection criteria determines what output they get. So if you don't have a selection criteria for every potential output, you can find yourself in a world of hurt really fast. And the way this is typically done is you just have a default that has no selection criteria on it so that if all the others fail, they get this, right? When a task is set up by default, that's what it does. It sets what the default fallback is for everything. So if you override a node and you completely change the layout of it and put new stuff up there, that's totally fine. If you don't do that, then we're going to go to, what is it, node view page or something? I don't know. I don't know what the fallback callback is on that, but we define that stuff there. When you end up doing a custom path, you need to define that, because if you don't, and you define access and selection criteria that don't always work perfectly, then you can't actually ship your user off into Never Never Land, okay?
You like reviews and number ones and number two and then number three? With complete zooming effects and everything?
Yes, I can do that. So, can you all read that now?
Yeah, now I can use it.
Okay. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
The context, if I'm thinking right, is it the elements in the node array?
No, it is the node. So it would be all of those things.
Okay. So
Like if you did a node load, that's what you would get.
okay. So it just falls in the stack versus the array that's rendering the object or
Right. When we're talking about context, like that node object is just one of many contexts that could exist simultaneously for a given page. So we could have that node, we could have the author of that node, we could have a node that node references, and all three of those things exist in the context pool together. Okay.
And you know that this is totally unrelated to the context module, right?
Yeah, everybody understands that context module and this are not related. Okay. Happy to talk about that more outside of this context. Ooh. No, it's just that context is so arbitrarily defined we can use it everywhere.
I know I'm using it for something else.
Yeah, yes, Larry's using it somewhere else. So yeah. So we're going to pick a path, pick a machine name, pick a task handler. Is this a panel? Is this a redirect? Is this a context admin page? What is this going to be? Then we define what sort of things are going to get passed to it. We defined the path. Now we define what are the wildcards coming across on that. Are those nodes? Are those users? What are they? Access, who has access to this? Then we have variants and task handlers, okay? And so variants can load up their own contexts, right? If we get to a, keep using that blog example. If we end up on a blog variant and we say, well, we want the author of the blog as a context as well, then that variant can actually load that for us in addition to what was already in the pool, right? Selection criteria determines which variant we're actually going to end up seeing. Node type blog, true, false. Node type page, true, false, right? Don't have one? Here, render this instead. And then task handler options if there are any. Panels is obviously the best example here. I mean, you do a full layout and actually put crap all over the place. Those are the options that are available to you within panels. Within context admin, it's a much simpler, just like list of radio buttons that you select from generally. So let's see, I think I had, oops, woo. Yeah, only one variant is valid. Keep that in mind, right? And the first variant that passes selection criteria is what gets delivered. So this is an important point to make. If performance is an issue for you, make sure that the variant that is going to be fired most often is at the top of that list. If the blogs are the hardest hit nodes in your entire site, make sure that blogs are at the top of your variant list, right? This probably won't matter for the vast majority of you, but if it does matter, keep that in mind. Say that again?
Can you like drag the order up?
Yes, yes. Yeah, in the upper right-hand corner of the administration, you can actually click a button and then reorder them at any time. And then we get output. Magic, right? So I've burned almost 30 minutes here, so we're going to jump into the examples. Yeah, totally.
Is that output by combine template files with the theme also too?
No.
Okay.
But that's a really good question. So the question was, does that output come out in like some sort of a template file that the themer can manage and change? And the answer to that question fundamentally is no. But if we talk about panels, which is the most robust of the options that are available here, panels works based upon a layout plugin system. So you can write your own layout plugins, and those are really dead simple. Like, as someone who came to Drupal from a designer, I'm only building HTML and CSS standpoint, I mean, that's where I started. You know, as someone who came to it from there, like, this is going to be pretty easy. You're dealing with a relatively simple info file and then building HTML and dropping what are essentially just like variables into those places that you want to output stuff. It's just like dealing with a TPL file. And then from there, the content types that we talked about, those are individual components of output. So if you don't like what you've got, look at the one that's there and rebuild the output for it in a custom content type. You could probably reuse everything else but that. Right? So if you don't like the way node titles are coming out and you don't have the options to change it the way that you want, just go to town on that. Okay? Now, any other questions? No? Okay, cool. So let's hop into an example. Okay, so I wanted to do something moderately crazy. So I came to speak at a Drupal camp, yeah. Actually, you know, the first time I went to DrupalCon, I spoke.
Moderately crazy.
Moderately crazy, yeah. So what I did here was I got Apache Solr up and running. Anybody in here used Apache Solr for anything? Yeah? Anybody in here use Search API yet? 1, 2, 3, 4? Okay. Search API is pretty cool. I'm not here to debate that coolness one way or the other, but in my opinion, it's pretty cool. And one of the things that Search API does, just kind of as background for those of you who are about to see this, is it actually, when you define an index of things that you want to drop off into Solr, it tells views about that and pretends to be a new base table against that, right? Which means we can create views of Solr queries. That's pretty cool, actually. And so what we're actually looking at here is a blog page. Now, what you're seeing is a single view, okay? Single view. You'll notice I have my exposed filter for search up here. I have a pager up at the top of the page. I have the first 3 blog articles here, the next 2 blog articles here, and then the rest, what, 6 through 10 here, right? And then I have another pager at the bottom. It's all one view. I'll show you this in a minute, right? And this, of course, is the faceted search against our Solr backend. So if I only want to see, let's go with a name I can't pronounce because it's Latin. Right? I get the top 9 from him because he only posted 9. And I don't have a pager anywhere anymore. So this is acting just like you expect views to act. And then if we want to do a search, right, I'm getting stuff against just that word. And we will facet it down to just things that he posted for that word. And so, I mean, this is views in a panel running search API on the back end, using a solar engine for the back. So it's kind of crazy. So let's just dive in. That is weird, isn't it? Who in here has ever used a content pane view? Crickets. 1. Okay. 2. Yeah. Like 3 people? 3 or 4? Okay. So content panes. All right. No, we're going to back up. Modules. All right. So there's this module in CTools called Views Content Panes. Turn it on. Like, just from now on, if you're using views, turn it on. Okay, if you're using views and panels together on the same site, you want this. What it does is it creates 2 new page display plugins. Everybody in here has probably created a page view and a block view. Yeah? Everyone, pretty much? Okay. Stop using them. Okay. Start using this. So content panes are essentially, like, hopefully, they'll be what blocks end up being in Drupal 8. But we'll have that discussion later.
No, mud wrestle now.
Yeah, we agree on this one. Yeah. So this enables 2 new view display plugins: the content pane and the context pane, or the context view. Okay. So content panes are very similar to blocks. They're individual chunks of views, except that they can consume context straight out of a page, manager page. So they're smart. They know what contexts they require. They know what item in a context they're actually going to consume in order to produce the results. So instead of saying, I'm passing you the term ID, you say, I'm passing you a term object, and you want to grab the ID out of that. And it knows how to do that and just goes. So it's a very, very powerful sort of system sitting there. Context views are views that get loaded into the context pool. And this has the happy benefit of actually sort of executing that view for us so that the Solr queries facets will be available to us and we don't have to display them after the view is rendered, which is very annoying, by the way. So, let's look at that. Views. See, I think the blog index is the one I'm working against here. Yeah, it is. So you'll notice it's a context view. Like, that's what it is. If I add, I'll have content pane and context. We're just going to look at the context view here for the moment because that's the one that we're actually in. And so it has a context settings area where I've told it to go ahead and use the panel path because we don't want it to fail when we pass it a search criteria through the search bar. And I've told it, I don't have actually any arguments to give it. But if I did, if it were accepting an argument, I could specify what sort of arguments it takes here. So, I don't know, crazy idea. You want to have a Solr query sitting on top of catalog terms. This would do that, right? Really, really functionally powerful, and all from the user interface. So, come over here, look at this, and we'll just add something new for a second. And when we have a view context loaded into our page, actually we'll look at that first. I shouldn't get ahead of myself. View, there it is. It's loaded as a context. I specified the view that I want, which is actually blog index, right? And when I do that, it ends up showing me a new view context area. So just like we end up having view panes and node and various other things that contextually show us the relevant content we can output, so too does a view. And so if I want to show the exposed widgets, exposed filters, exposed widgets, whatever, I can do that. And it's just a single chunk of content that I can put anywhere in the panel I want. Same thing's true of the pager. Same thing's true of individual view rows. Right? I can say, I want result 1 here. I want result 2 and 3 here. I want results 3 through 10 here. Stick a pager under that. We can do all that sort of stuff. Really, really, really robust. And so that's exactly what we've got. I've got the exposed widgets. I've got the pager. I've got views 1, 2, and 3, rows 4 and 5, and then rows 6 through 10 here with another pager. Okay? Everybody kind of see how that's put together? Questions? No? No questions?
Determine just rows 6, 7, 8, 9,
It's pretty easy. Now, as others within Commerce Guys have pointed out to me recently, it'd be a whole lot nicer if we could just like say, I want row 1 and 3, 6 through 10, you know, in some sort of maybe text format, or if we format this nicer, but I just got this crap working, so, you know. It was working in 6 beforehand. We needed it in 7 really badly, so spent a lot of time getting it up and running in 7, and it's really, really freaking awesome. So I would love for people to go in and figure out what's broken about it and start telling me, because I think I've stopped clicking on the broken stuff so that I don't have to deal with it. But, you know, it's right. So now there is a limitation here, and I'm just going to like throw this out there for all of you. Context views don't have row formatters in the way that you're used to. So you can't say, hey, I just want to display 1 through 3 as a table and 2, you know, the next one's as tables and everything. You're not going to get that. It's like raw, we're going to put together the fields and just spit them out on the page. So I would heavily suggest that if you don't want to just like beat the crap out of yourself trying to make it look really nice, that you toss in a global custom text and use the tokening system inside of views to actually format your output a little bit, because it'll make your life a whole lot easier in the long run, and you can get back around to making it look better later. Right? So, and that is indeed exactly what I'm doing. Now, I'd show that, but I have 2 more things I want to show off, so I'm not going to. So this is just a typical news page. Nothing special about it. If I go and I visit a particular news article, though, you'll notice I have a similar articles section, right? Similar articles is pretty cool. I mean, most of us could really make use of that. These are Solar results. Solar is telling me what it thinks is related to the string that I passed it. So let's look at that for a second. Now, my view is displaying rows 2 through 6, because the most relevant thing is, of course, myself, right? And this is just displaying the node that we're looking at. So the magic is all happening in the view here. So let's go actually look at that then. I wish I could just click this and get to my views. Yeah, I probably should have added shortcuts for all the views that were actually relevant here. I think it's this one. Nope, not this one. Great. Okay. So I assume everybody in here has built an argumented view at some point. They changed it to be called contextual filters recently. That's cool. So what this one actually is this is a search full text from Search API as a filter. So I can pass anything through the view as an argument that I want. And it will do a filtered search against Apache Solar and deliver me results from that, right? And so what I did was I just came over here and I told it in the argument input that I required a context, and the let's see, the item that we're passing it is actually node title. For some reason, I upgraded to the newest everything and I'm not getting my default values. But we're passing the node title through from the node context as a search query. And it just automatically fires that and shows me the top titles of all the top results for that. So this node title is getting passed into Apache Solr via views arguments from panels and spits me out anything that it thinks is relevant to that.
So it's not using any kind of tags. I thought you were using tags in the background or something like that.
No, I use taxonomy terms as my verbal example, but I don't actually have that set up right now.
So this is literally taking the title of that article and, okay.
Yeah, it's taking the title, passing it through to this view, and this view is shipping it off to Apache Solr, and then spitting out the top 5 results based upon what it thinks is most relevant to that title. Now, I've been told that Apache Solr actually has a more like this feature, where if you actually work with it, you could do that, and that's not been exposed, but it should be rather trivial for me to make that my contextual filter instead of a search, in which case I think I would get even better results, but I'm not going to worry about that right this moment because that would require code. So we have 3 minutes, and I'm just going to show you one last thing. Anybody in here been to any Drupal commerce presentations this week? Yeah, quite a few. Ryan, you don't count. So this isn't out in the wild yet. I'm working real hard to make sure it gets out into the wild. But for those of you who've been to the Drupal commerce presentations, you've probably seen them like put what we have functionally called attributes in the past up, and then have the whole page change whenever they change the attributes. And that's really freaking cool. But what would be even cooler is if I could take the individual portions of that product and place them anywhere in a panel and have them update on their own when I change that too. Something kind of like that, right? So now, I mean, you all may not be able to see it, but let's see. Yeah, let's turn up the volume. Oh. It does not go to 11. So if I'm changing here, you can watch the price. I mean, the image is obvious, but you can watch the price, and the price actually changes from 21.50 to 21, right? You can watch the color, it changes from white to black, right? So we're actually doing AJAX updates across panel panes automatically through the user interface. Like, there's no code involved that you have to do to make this happen. You just have to know what to click.
How about this?
How about that? So that's my presentation. I think I have 2 minutes. I'm happy to field any questions both now and later. Yes?
That's what I mean, this is a great fashion. This project page has the documentation.
Documentation, fantastic. Okay, so if you want to actually start understanding what is out there, there are 2 things you should do. The first and most important is go download advanced help and install it on your site. And just start reading through anything that's in there on Page Manager. And I don't know how well documented that is because I haven't done it recently. But inevitably, that's going to like drop you into code to actually start learning stuff. And the best place to learn anything about CTools-based code is always in the CTools includes folder. It has just a ton of stuff in there, and there's a ton of documentation in almost every single include file in there. So if you want to learn more about plugins, open up the plugin include and just start reading because they have documented it very, very well. AJAX the same, you know, all of these areas the same. Yeah?
It's probably a very basic question, but I've done panels, the UI is almost exactly the same. The functionality is very similar here. Compare and contrast pages and panels very quickly as far as definition.
Sure. Layout, content, and preview. That's all that's panels. Everything else you've ever been dealing with is Page Manager. And these 3 things can be thrown away and be replaced by something completely separate. So as a really quick example, if we come back over to News, you'll notice News has a Create News tab. And if I hit that, it has an Edit Context admin, which is the exact same thing. Except instead of layout, content, and preview, I have content, which is relatively simple, and content settings, which is also relatively simple. So the only thing I did was I told it what path, what access, what context, and then spit me out a create new node for news. Yes, Larry.
So, actual serious question, believe it or not.
Oh, I'll get prepared.
One of the biggest barriers I've run into in terms of leveraging this toolchain is its complexity, both conceptually and with UI. What's the easiest way to ramp people up on understanding the benefits of the system other than coming to one of your talks? To convince people that, yes, you should use this non-context model and template tags.
Yeah, if I knew that, I'd be telling you. If I knew that, I'd be doing it, right? At the moment, and actually, I honestly want to thank all of you who showed up here today because there were a lot of other really cool talks in this time slot. So I appreciate the fact that you showed up here. I've had a little bit of difficulty actually getting traction at the cons with this talk. So we've been doing BOFs, and that's been going pretty well. But there is a real big disconnect because of the complexity that sits here. And my only solution to it is to educate as many other Drupal people as I possibly can so that they'll educate others, and hopefully we get over this problem. Earl very much wants to put a new user interface on top of it, and I think that's great. I think that there were a lot of things learned from the new Views UI that could apply very easily to this, but what the timeline on that looks like, I haven't the foggiest clue. So I don't really have an answer to your question except to acknowledge that what you're saying is absolutely a problem. Any other questions? Yeah?
Is there any way to reach you with questions?
I am on IRC day and night in almost every Drupal Dash channel you can find.
And another question, you're using a term called consume. I'm assuming that means input. Going to get
Sure. Sure. If I want to spit out a node title, I have to consume a node object before I can figure out what its title is going to be. That's just me talking. It has nothing to do with panels or page manager. Yeah. I think that's probably all I have time for, so hunt me down afterwards if you have more questions. I'm happy to sit and talk about Page Manager all day.